And when I came back, I met up with my mentor, and she asked, how school went. I said, good. She asked about classes, and I told her about some of my favorite ones. And then she gets this big smile on her face, and she leans across the table and said, so, did you have any crises of faith? She got really perky in a sadistic sort of way. To hear about the hardest times, to hear how I struggled and, when I was challenged the most. And I got it. I got why she was asking me. Because there's sort of this long running inside joke about your first year of seminary. And they say if you make it to the end and you have any faith left over, then you've pretty much made it. Then you're already there, good to go, just full steam ahead. It's either going to surprise you a ton or not surprise you at all that the classes that just rocked people the most were Intro to Old and Intro to New Testament. Reading the Bible is a lot harder than a lot of people think, Because does anyone here have any idea how many different ways there are to read the Bible? Turns out the number of people who have ever read it are reading it now and will ever read it. That's how many different ways there are to read and interpret the Bible. And that in itself is a really hard concept for a lot of us to sort of wrap our heads around. Because you guys know this, the Bible is weird. It's a very weird book. It's this weird, eclectic compilation of all these different genres of literature just sandwiched in between two books, or in between two covers. There's prose and poetry and history and story, etiology, cosmology, the list goes on and on and on. And in classes, we are taught how we can read and interpret these differently. And that ruffled some feathers, we'll say, in class. Because you got one guy saying, listen, if Jonah was not actually swallowed whole by that whale, then I can't believe in anything. You've got another chick over here who's saying, finally, this is making sense to me. This means something to me. You've got a guy back here who's saying, well, I could never say that in my church. And a girl over here is going, what are you talking about? I can't wait to say that in my church. In our New Testament class one day, we were talking about the Gospels, like you would in a New Testament class, and how they were different from each other, how they differed, and why they might be different from each other. And this prompted this big what-if game. What if the gospel writers weren't the people they claimed to be at the top of the page? What if they didn't intend for the writings to become canonized like they have been? What if they didn't even know Jesus personally? And this escalated and escalated and escalated until a friend of mine raised his hand and went so far as to say, so really, for all we know for sure, Jesus could have been just another guy with dust on his feet like everyone else that had all of this written about him. What did he say? Can you even say that? In a seminary? And my professor, without missing a beat, looked him straight in the eye and said, yep. And he left this very pregnant pause that made us all very uncomfortable. And then he said something that I will never forget. He said, the only thing that we can know for sure is that around 2,000 years ago, something happened, and it changed people's lives. And that is really all we can know for sure, because the rest is faith, right? And this terrifies us. We want so badly to know for sure, to know the right way to read the Bible, to know the right way to be a Christian, because it's so easy to believe in something when you know it's right. But it's not supposed to be easy, is it? And it actually says so right here in Matthew. So in this parable, Jesus is on a boat because there's a huge crowd of people, and he tells this parable about seeds. And he explains that the seeds that land on the rocks and sprout up early are those who hear the word and immediately receive it with joy. Which doesn't sound so bad, does it? I mean, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Read the Bible, listen to stories from the Bible, and be excited about it. This is the Word of God. But because they don't have these deep roots, the joy doesn't last long, and their faith gets scorched. And I thought it was fascinating that this was in comparison to the seeds that landed on good ground, grew deep roots, and flourished. And these were the people who received the word and understood it. There is a difference between receiving the word with joy, but having really shallow roots, and receiving the word and understanding it and growing deep, deep roots that keep you upright. So how do we begin to understand in this deep, deep way, other than just receiving the word with joy? Well, let's go to the basics. Let's go to the Bible, right? The good book. There is good news to be found in the good book, right? Is it all good? Is it all good in the same way? Are some parts of the Bible better than others? Are some parts more authoritative than others? Uh-oh! These are very dangerous questions, aren't they? My sister Caitlin just finished her first year at UMD, and she took this sociology or psychology religion? Philosophy of world religion. And I actually laughed when I found out she was taking this because Caitlin is sort of a very linear thinker. And if I could come up with anything that was the opposite of linear, it might be the philosophy of world religion. But she ended up loving the class. And after lecture one day, she sent me a text message. And all it said was, Numbers 31. Read it, call me. So like any good seminarian student, I had a Bible already in my right hand. So I flipped it open to Numbers 31, and I read it. There's some ugly, ugly stuff in there. This particular part of Numbers talks about Moses leading a war against Midian, okay? And it gets particularly dicey around verse 13. Moses is really, really mad at his troops because his troops just attacked Midian and they slaughtered everyone except the women. And Moses is ticked at his troops because he told them they had to kill everyone. This bothered me, and this bothered Caitlin because we had this idea of who Moses was, this epic hero who delivered the Hebrew people out of Egypt, and this Moses comes along and just sucker punches our Moses right in the face. So what are we supposed to do with that? Because there it is, in the Bible, the good book. I think there can be a collective oofta right about there.